Good morning. Continuing our review of the conclusion of Hemshech Ayin Beis, built upon the essay that I wrote on this topic. We're on page 40 of the essay, which is posted at our Ayin Beis WhatsApp group. So we're in the middle of page 40. And what we are in the middle of doing was going back to the beginning of the Hemshech. It's the main focus of chapter 7, the last chapter of this essay. To the beginning, B'shar Sheikdimu Yisrael Naaseh Nishma, and the Malachi Asharis wove for them two ksarim, and the Rebbe Rashab asks a series of 6 questions, and then goes into the theme of Keser. What is Keser? The Mamutza, the interface. And in the process of understanding Keser, he explains also the Esses, which are the Eres Pnimim, the internalized divine energy within existence, with Keser being the Makiv. Then in Keser itself, there are levels. In general, 2 levels, which break into 3 levels. And with that, at the end of the first part of Ayin Beis, namely the Maimer V'Leyuchel Yosef in Tofrei Shayin Gimel, chapters 121 through 126, with 126 concluding that the 3 meanings in Keser correspond to 3 levels that refer to what he called, the last thing we learned was that there's Keser, that's the name going on Matla Maila, Sivu Vatzilus, it surrounds Atzilus, it's a makiv that relates to the Pnimi, is the and then it becomes Nimshach into the Pnimius of Ishtalshalus and the Elamis, that he called Rotzen Goli. Then there's Keser Torah, the crown, that's a makif on its own, he called that Rotzen Nelam, hidden Rotzen. And then there's Keser from the word Shtika, silence, completely removed. He called that Rotzen Atzmi, Etzma Rotzen. That's not Gili at all. And with that, I went back and said, Pikol Anal, we can understand. According to all this, we'll be able to start understanding the answers to the questions asked in the beginning of the Hemshech. But to do that, I went back to continuing, what does Ayin Beis do after he finishes about the 3 levels of Keser? He goes on in the next Maimer, Vasisach Tag Shvuos, and he talks about, he repeats the questions, well, 2 of the 6 questions, the 2 Ksarim and the 3 Ksarim, Keser Teira, Keser Kuna, Keser Malchus, and why by Bishar Shekdimu was 2 crowns, here is 3 crowns, and also Keser Shem Tov El Al Gabeim, why is that not counted among the crowns, and even though it's a 4th crown? And then he continues and says, now we need to understand these 3 ksarim, and he does so by beginning, but understand it according to the 2 tracks from Eir Ein Sof. One track that's a Eir Ein Sof Bli Gvul, and one track that's a Gvul, Eir HaGvul, Eir Pnimi. So I suggested was that from the flow, it appears that the 2 break into 3. Because, like he said earlier, there's the Eir HaGvul, okay, then there's the Eir HaBli Gvul, and the Eir HaBli Gvul itself breaks into 2 levels. One, the level like he called it, what we called he calls it, let's read exactly. Gufi yesh beis madregas, echkameshu moved l'meir pnimi legamri, and one that's still the form of a makif le'elamis v'ishtalshlus. And he then says, now we have the 3 things that are in Keser. These are the 3 levels of Keser. So clearly the 2 and 3, the 2 are in general, and the 3 breaks it down into that breakdown. As I explained in the paragraph 3 on page 40. But we still need to understand what's the connection of the 2 ksarim to Naaseh and to Nishma. That was not explained yet. And of course, the explanation of the other questions the Rebbe Rashab asked. And also, which of the 2 are the 2 general tracks, Ein Sof and Gvul, and which one breaks into 2? Okay, so that's where we stopped, and now we'll continue from there. Let me just make sure I covered everything here. Yeah. Now, one more thing I should mention, that this understanding of the 3 levels of Keser is based both on what the Rebbe Rashab does say, what we just learned in Tofrei Shayin Gimel in chapter 126, and then continuing from there, and also the end of the Hemshech, where he goes back to the three levels of Yichud Tata, Yichud Ilah, and the Yichud of both, Das Tacht and Das Elyon, and the Yichud of both. So all this is going to come together as we shall see. So now we'll continue from middle of page 40, the section that begins, Hachut HaMachaber, Kol Naaseh HaHemshech, V'Hashaychus Ben Sefer HaHemshech V'Tchilaseh. So basically the thread that connects all the different themes of Hemshech Ayin Beis and the connection between the end of the Hemshech and its beginning. So that's what I'm going to address now. So as you see, this is all coming together now when you start seeing the different pieces and how they interconnect. V'yesh lahavin zeh, I will understand this. In other words, we still have to understand the Ksarim. We understand in general that there are two tracks which break into three, but we need to understand it in more depth and more detail. It says, Yesh lahavin zeh al pi hamavur. I'm right now on page 40, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph. Again, this essay, if you want to follow, is at the Ayin Beis WhatsApp group. V'yesh lahavin zeh al pi hamavur barucha behemshech tidan. We'll understand this according to what is explained at length in our Hemshech Ayin Beis, as it was summarized in the earlier chapters of this essay, by the two interpretations in the verse from Tehillim, which we say in Ashrei. So you remember the Aromemcho L'Kayim Melech is a very central point that begins to be discussed at the end of volume 1 in Ayin Beis, but it continues through volume 2, that this is the place where it talks about Mamat L'Mayla, Mamay L'Mata. What are the two interpretations? Hayichud Mamat L'Mayla, Aromemcho L'Kayim Melech as in elevating L'Kayim Melech, which is Elikus and Malchus, as it manifests within existence, like the Eira Gvul, and elevating it, Aromemcho, we're elevating it, we're exalting it to the level of Keser. Rememus is Keser. This is the Yichud Mamat L'Mayla be'ikar ayidei Tefillah, primarily through davening, which we discussed at length in this earlier chapters of this essay and in Ayin Beis, of course, at length. Hamavur b'chelik beis shel hemshech be'perik shin pei daled. This is explained that it's through Tefillah in the second volume of Ayin Beis, from chapter 384, page 790 and on. And then there's the second interpretation. Aromemcho L'Kayim Melech, that Aromemcho, your mamshech, Aromemcho rememus into L'Kayim Melech. Hayir v'yichud mamayla lamata, be'ikar ayidei Torah. The yichud that happens mamayla lamata, from the top down, and that's primarily through Torah. Hamavur b'chelik gimel shel hemshech, Omer Aleph Shinun Ve'elech. That's explained in volume 3, page 1350 and on. And you recall this structure. So now we're going to connect volume 1 to volume 2 and volume 3, basically. But essentially, that the themes and ideas of the Ksarim are actually connected to the themes of Yichud Mamat L'Mayla Mamay L'Mata, which is either Aromemcho L'Kayim Melech from the bottom up or Aromemcho L'Kayim Melech from the top down. Now this, the Rebbe Rashab himself does not make the connection, because remember, he never ends the Hemshech getting back to the Ksarim. But I am trying and attempting to make this connection. That's the chut that I pointed out in the title of this section, the headline of this section. This is the thread that connects them, as we'll discuss. Shazen Naaseh Merkazi. This is the central theme, v'chut ha'machaber shel kol ha'hemshech, and the connecting thread of the entire hemshech. Because what we just summed up literally goes all the way from the beginning of the hemshech through Tefillah, through Torah in volume 3. Hamamutze v'yichud ben Ein Sof ve'elamis. The interface and the union of Ein Sof and existence and the elamis. Which is the inyan of Keser, as we learned from page 1 or page 2 in Ayin Beis. That's what Keser is. Keser is the mamutza, the rotzen. That's a mamutza between Ein Sof and Elamis. that Hashem wants existence. That's the first interface. Ratzon Elyon shemahave shaychus ben elikus ve'elamus. The supernal desire of Hashem, God's desire, that creates a relationship between elikus and elamus. Without that, there would be no relationship. That was the whole point of what Kesed is. P'chinas Aromemcho. And that Kesed, that's the level of Aromemcho. So there you have one long thread that connects everything together. Now again, this is not anywhere specifically stated, but it's very implicit. When you read the whole thing, it becomes very clear, because Aromemcho is Kesed, Kesed is Mamutza. There's two ways the Mamutza works, Mamat Lamayla, Mamayla Lamata, Tefillah and Teda, and there you have that. We've still not talked about the third level, but we have this point so far. Now, continuing, any questions before I continue? Okay. But Mamutza Amamiti, in a real Mamutza, a true interface, like we learned earlier, Kadesha Mamutza Yir Sholem, for the interface to be complete, Kol Chelik Memenu Keilas Kol Achalokim Ha'achedim. Every part of the Mamutza encompasses all other parts. That's what makes it so seamless in its interface. The more the Mamutza is interconnected with each other, with the levels within each other, the better it will be. Let's take the example of a translator. Someone knows Hebrew and someone knows English. They need to communicate, but they don't know both languages. So they bring a translator or an interpreter. The translator is in writing, an interpreter is in speaking. I discovered recently from the interpreter of President Milei in Argentina. He told me the difference. But regardless, this interpreter knows both languages. Now, how well does he know both languages? Let's say he knows Hebrew very well and English not so well. So he'll translate it, but it won't be that perfect. But if his Hebrew and English are both excellent, then he automatically, when he hears the Hebrew, he knows immediately how to translate it into English because they're so seamless for him. Which means that the Hebrew and the English are also interconnected in his mind. The teichen, the content of what he's conveying. So a mamutza, to be complete, like we learned earlier, is that each part encompasses the other. That's why we said Keser has both Atik and Arich in it. That's the Kiddush of the Arizal. That even though Keser is an interface, but it's an interface that has both a piece of Ein Sof, so to speak, the Tachtene Shebemaitzil, the lower part of the emanator, which is Atik, and Reishan Etzolim, which is the beginning of the emanations, Arich. And then in Atik itself there's Arich, and in Arich there's Atik, as we discussed. So for Mamutza to be really complete, each part encompasses all the other parts. V'chenu im b'chinas hakeser. And same thing with Keser. Even though Keser is higher than the Spheres, the Esser Spheres are encompassed in Keser. Even though you could say Keser is higher than them. But remember, the Chiddush of that Yisrael is that there's a part of Keser that's not in the Spheres, which is high Atik. There's a part of Keser that has Spheres, which is Arich. Esser Spheres, hein by Er Pnimi, v'hein by Er Makif. So we have 10 spheres, both in the Er Pnimi, of course, that's in the 10 spheres, the regular spheres of Chachma through Malchus, and both in the Er Makif, as we learned earlier when the Rebbe Rashab asked the question, what is spheres in Er Makif? And he explained it comes from Behirus. There the spheres are not so much structure, but they're still spheres, they're still channels of illumination. B'chlolos, in general, we're breaking now this mamutza into breaking it down. Beis hamadregas ba mamutza de keser, beis ksarim. In general, this means that there are two levels in this interface of keser. These are the two crowns. Ubeprati is gimel madregas. And when you break it down, it's actually three levels. P'chinas hakeser aromemcho hashayich le'elmus. The first interpretation of keser, the keser aromemcho that relates to existence, that was makif of Atzilus, Seivev Atzilus, Machtir. Beis, b'chinas hakeser shoam shocha de Ein Sof, makif on its own, it's hamshocha of Ein Sof, the second interpretation. Hamakif le'elmus, it's makif le'elmus, but it remains above, not quite like the first level, which relates to the spheres, like he's envisioning them, etc. And in this second level, there are two levels. The way it's completely removed from the pnimi. And the second, that's in the form of makiv the elimus and ishtalshlus, not envisioning them and not relating to them, but still makiv, he still has some connection, which is keser v'atara. So there you see the three interpretations of keser. Three levels in keser are actually two, with the second one breaking into two, like we said before. She already starts seeing here the idea of two ksarim and three ksarim. Still not finished. But I'll stop again if there are any questions before I continue. Any questions? Who al derech, and this that we just discussed, going back to Aromemcho, is al derech one. Aromemcho mamata l'mayla. So what's Aromemcho mamata l'mayla? There, you're taking this, the existence, the structure of Elikai HaMelech, which is the divine within existence, call it the pnimi. That's Elikai HaMelech. Keser shememenu ba hagvul, because it's Aromemcho. You're elevating it to Keser. So it's the Keser from which comes the hagvul, the lower level. Das tachten yichud tata. That's level one. It's das tachten yichud tata. It's not just pnimi, because it's Aromemcho Elikai HaMelech. Is the pnimi being elevated through tefillah, and that's das tachten yichud tata. Two, Aromemcho mamay lamata. Makiv ein sof, das elyon yichud elah. That's the perspective from above, yichud elah, the makiv of keser and atara, level two. And then, remember, we said level two breaks into a third level, chibur sheneim yachad mitzad atzmusei yizbarach. The joining of both of them from atzmusei yizbarach. This is al derech, the third level in keser that's completely removed, shtika. So we have now this two, which breaks into three tracks in the central theme of keser and Aromemcho, and now we're going to see that it also carries over to a whole bunch of themes in Ayin Beis. So it's a connection I'm going to be making now with many, many themes. The Gimel Inyanim Elu, and these three levels, or these three dimensions, Matzinu b'kama dvarim b'teicha hemshech. We find it in a number of places and a number of instances and applications throughout the Hemshech Ayin Beis. Literally, if you go through Ayin Beis, you'll see these three pop up in many different places. And I'm going to mention a bunch of them. K'mavur barucha ba'hemshech, as it's explained at length in the Hemshech. We're now at the bottom of page 40, the last line. Tamtzir shmena nimtze b'chelik hakedim. A summary of this you'll find in the previous chapter, Chelik Vav Shel Harazu, chapter 6 of this essay. I moved to top of page 41. Sheyesh Gimel Inyanim. Hayichud Momata Lamayla, Yichud Tata Das Tachten, Hayichud Mamayla Lamata, Yichud Elah Das Elyon, the Yichud Shel Shnei Yichudim V'Hadeyas Yachad, B'tzad Atzmusei Yizbarach. So I said this before, but I'm going out where it's explained in the Hemshech, especially in volume 3. This was discussed at length, especially the end of volume 3. So the yichud from the bottom up, yichud from the top down, and the yichud of both yichudim. V'zeu agimel inyanim, and this corresponds to the three levels of mamala kalalman, the mamala kalalman, sevav kalalman, va'atzmus. Keneged b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha, which correspond to the three levels of Ahavtas Hashem Lekecha, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your all, your bligvul. V'heim keneged hagimel efanim b'am tokas hagvuras, and this also corresponds what we discussed in volume 3, the three ways you sweeten the gvuras. If you remember, one is that you bring enough sweet that overshadows and neutralizes the bitter. Second is that you actually, the sweetness transforms the bitterness, and the third is that the bitterness itself gets sweetened from their root. Hagimel Suda Shabbos. This is more closer to the end of volume 2. The truth is I should probably add page numbers for all these different levels of Gimel. I say I didn't write the page numbers for whatever reason. So people can look it up. And there's a Gimel, so Gimel Suda Shabbos. The 3 meals of Shabbos, he also explains. The meal, Friday night meal, the Shabbos afternoon meal, and Shalosh Suda is the 3rd meal. Also correspond to these 3 levels. Gimel Dargis B'Rotzev V'Shuv. 3 levels in Rotzev V'Shuv, which we did learn earlier in this essay. We summed it up. The Rotze from Biyah to Atzilus, from Atzilus to higher than Atzilus, and higher than Atzilus to the Oyer in its source. Gimel Dargis B'Avayu Elikim. And we learned 3 levels in Avayu Elikim, if you recall, which connect to the 3 levels of Rotze. How Avayu Elikim become one in 3 different madregas. Va'oid. And there are more 3s, so to speak, triple sets of 3 dimensions throughout Ayin Beis. Aval b'chlolos, but in general, harigimu madregas shaloi nichlolos bebeis madregas. Should not be shaloi, it should be elu. But in general, these 3 levels, in general, are encompassed in 2 levels: beis ksarim, echad keneged Naaseh, ve'echad keneged nishma. They in general encompassed in the 2 ksarim of 1 keneged Naaseh and 1 keneged nishma. And now we're going to understand what is Naaseh and nishma, what's the connection to these 2 levels. That we didn't discuss yet. But what it did here was understand in a deeper way the connection to 2 and 3, and also to the 3 throughout Ayin Beis that all are related to these 3 points, the 3 dimensions like in Keser, one that relates to existence, one that's on its own, and one that's beyond both, and unites them both. Okay. So I'll stop here for any questions, if there are any, because we stopped the section out. We're going to go into another section. But before we do, please, if anybody needs anything to be clarified. All clear? Okay, good. Okay, so then we're now page 41. We're on the 3rd paragraph. We're going to start the 3rd paragraph. Bir al Ashailis, be'inyan habeis ksarim, echad keneged Naaseh and echad keneged Mishma. So now we need to understand what's the connection to Naaseh and Nishma. That was not explained at all. And of course, the other questions that the Rebbe Rashab asked. So I continue like this. Ubezeh yuvan habir al hashaylos harashenis ba'hemshech. With this, we will understand, after all these points that were made, the explanation of the questions, the first questions that were asked in Hemshech Ayin Beis on page 1. B'negeya habeis ksarim. As was cited earlier, the 6 questions, the beginning of this chapter of the essay. 1, just summing up the questions. Since the ksarim were given because they higdimu, not just because they said Naaseh and Nishma, but that they preceded Naaseh before Nishma, Loma ksarim hem keneged Naaseh la'atzmei v'Nishma la'atzmei. Why are the ksarim corresponding to Naaseh and Nishma separately? It should have been 1 keser for Naaseh and Nishma, that they said it, and 1 for preceding Naaseh before Nishma. That was the first question that he asked. A second question. These are the questions we're going to answer now. Loma nitno ksarim al-yedei malachim v'yedei Kadosh Baruch Hu atzmei. Why Kishru did the Malachim are the ones that gave it to the Yidden, not the Eibishter himself. 3, Lama Beis Ksarim v'loi Gzimul Ksarim ki b'Mishnah d'Avos. Why 2 and not 3 like in the Mishnah of Avos? So it's just refreshing our memory of the questions that we're going to be answering, and then there's other questions that we'll answer later. Ubahagdim. To understand this, we have to preface yet another preface, where the same question is asked in Samach Vav, Hemshech Samach Vav, so of course a Hemshech, also a magnum opus of the Rebbe Rashab that preceded Ayin Beis by 6 years. Tafrei Samach Vav is 1906, actually 1905 when he started the Hemshech and Rosh Hashanah, Tafrei Samach Vav. It extended for 3 years, the Hemshech. Ayin Beis a lot longer, but Samach Vav. So it says like this: Bahagdim shebereish dibra machla b'shor she'ekdimu tafrei Samach Zayin behemshech tafrei Samach Vav amid taf mem Zayin. So Samach Vav goes, as I said, for a few years. So there's a maimer b'shor she'ekdimu, same beginning of the maimer of Hemshech Ayin Beis. There's a maimer that begins that way in Samach Vav, in Samach Zayin, the year tafrei Samach Zayin, and printed in Tafrei Samach Vav, page 447. So maybe Oisan Shailis Alamayim Chazal B'Shor Shekdimu. There he brings the same questions that the Rebbe Rashab brings here in Ayin Beis. The Rebbe Rashab there asks the same questions, but there he answers them. So here we're going to be able to base on his answer there and draw from there and understanding the answer here. That's what I'm going to be doing now. So he asks the same questions. Not all the questions, but a number of them. Also continuing in the Hemshech, a bunch of Mamorim later, in the Maimar HaShamayim Kisi, Tofrei Samaches, again, it's Tofrei Samach Vav, Tofrei Samach Zayin, Tofrei Samaches, Sham Omet Tovkuf Chavtes, in Hemshech Samach Vav, it's printed on page 529, Metaretz. He answers the questions. And now we're going to read 1, 2, 3, a good a good 2 pages, almost 2 pages, that are all a summary of Samach Vav. So this is now the next sections. We're going to learn what he says in Samach Vav to answer the questions of Naaseh and Nishma, and we'll see from that how connected it is to Ayin Beis. And it's actually going to help us understand Ayin Beis a lot better. And of course, Ayin Beis helps us understand Samach Vav better, which I'll discuss later in this essay. So right now, the next section is dedicated, literally I'm saying here, the next 2 pages are all going to be the language of Samach Vav in understanding the Ksarim of Naaseh and Nishma. And you'll see, as we learn it, you'll see quite fascinating how the Rebbe Rashab said it there already, which again gives me certain confidence that since the Rebbe Rashab answered these questions, the same questions, that the confidence to be able to apply those same very answers to our discussion, obviously in the context of Ayin Beis, as we shall discuss. So in a way, in Samach Vav, we get a preview of a beer of Ksarim, but in Ayin Beis, obviously the whole Hemshech is about Keser. So it in a way prepares us to understand Ayin Beis better. Okay, before I start, any questions? V'zel Shene, and we're citing now actual language from Samach Vav in the Maimar HaShamayim Kisi, in answering the questions on B'Shor She'ekdimu, about the 2 Ksarim. So he says like this: Dehine Piresh Nishma. When we say Naaseh v'Nishma, Naaseh means we will do, we'll perform, we'll do it. Nishma means to listen, the pashtus. But the Rebbe Rashab is going to explain. Pirush Nishma ein hakavona al shmiyas ha'ezen. It doesn't just mean, the intention is not listen, just the fact that you hear with your ear. Because Nishma literally means that we will first do and then we will listen. So listen can mean that even before we hear what you're saying, we're doing it already. We're ready to do it. So he says it's not just Shmiyas Ezen. Because if they don't hear what Hashem says, how can they do anything? They have to hear it. So you can't say Naaseh v'nishma means we do and then we hear. What are you going to do? You have to hear what Hashem says. So that's what you're Naaseh. So you can't say it means Shmiya Se'ezin. Shezei iyef sheyasa taram sheyishma. Ubehechlech l'shmeya tchila v'achar kach lases. First you have to hear, physically hear. So then what does Nishma mean? Why is Naaseh kedin Nishma? Ela rutzein lema Nishma hu shmiyas halev. It's hearing it with your heart, that it should resonate, that you should, shadover mekubel etzlei, that you accepting it, that you understand and appreciate it. So Naaseh v'nishma means we hear what you're saying, we do it, but nishma, we didn't yet really integrate it and internalize it. We did it because you said so, but not because it resonated and we accepted it. That's the chiddush. Usually a person says, first let me read the contract, let me understand it, let me appreciate it, and then I'll tell you whether I'm committing or not. Here they committed without that Shmiyas Halev. It didn't resonate with them yet. They were not mekabel it yet. But they heard the words. When Hashem said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, they heard the words, and they said immediately, Naaseh v'nishma. Well, they said it before. They said, tell us what you want, and immediately we do it. And then we'll go ahead and try to understand and appreciate and internalize it. So he's saying Nishma means belev shemekubel etzlei. That's what Nishma means. So now the Rebbe Rashab continues. V'hu avedas hatzadikim v'bchinas ave b'tanugim. Let me just see what he means by that. 1 second. And this is the level of Avedas HaTzadikim, Ave B'Tanugim. It's a high level of Aveda. I'm not sure if he means Shmiyas Halev, I think he means. Yeah. Naaseh v'nishma is Avedas HaEved. A Eved, a servant, says, tell me what you want and I do it. I don't need to understand it. I don't need to feel it. I don't need to rely, doesn't need to resonate with me. Nishma means Shmiyas Halev. That's the Aved of Tzadikim already. Where there's a Ave b'Tainugim, there's a love with pleasure. It's internalized. The B'derech Klal Zeh Madreges Yisrael b'chinas Bonim Shenizbar Le'il in Samach Vav. That's the level of Yisrael and Ben, not Yaakov and Eved. I'm just adding. He doesn't say it explicitly here, but that's what he discusses there. So a Ben, a son, is of course intimately connected with his father. He has a piece of him, DNA. So the Ben part is like the tzaddik. There is a nishma, belev. The chiddush of Naaseh v'nishma was that the Yidden, all of them, said, we will do even before it's internalized. That is called Avedas HaEved. Okay. The inyan Naaseh hu b'chinas iskafia. And this idea of Naaseh, doing it, even without yet really resonating with the person, is iskafia. You compel yourself to do it. It's not a matter of understanding and appreciating. You're forcing yourself to do it. It's a commitment. Like when we say get ha'ma'usa, a get, a divorce that's compelled, where a person doesn't want to do it, but he's compelled to do it. So the word is ha'ma'usa, you see from the word Naaseh. So Naaseh means to do, but it could also mean to be compelled. It means you're being compelled, compelled is the right word. He forces himself. So even though he fundamentally doesn't yet have a desire and a pleasure and joy in studying Torah and in mitzvahs, and also in davening, nevertheless, he puts aside his natural desire that he doesn't have, and he compels himself to do it anyway. So going against his natural inclination, that's Naaseh. Real Kabolas sale. He breaks himself to do it. So like he says in Tanya, chapter 27, which I'm in the middle of teaching now, he talks about the two types of pleasure Hashem has. So he says the ultimate pleasure, the greatest nachas ruach, is from iskafia, not ishapcha. That when a person has a temptation to do something, chol tchiyah v'tchiyah, the Alter Rebbe says, every time you refrain from following your yetzer hara, meaning fighting the battle, which can be a whole lifetime of battle, that reaches the deepest levels. Kadis kafia sitra achra, istalik ekara de kutchebricha b'kul alma, as he brings from Zayar there, is the highest level of nachas, reaches the highest levels. It's precisely because you're forcing yourself. Something comes easy or something already you enjoy, it's also a big madrege, and it's in some ways a transformation. But the real nachas is dira betachtenim, in a world where there's resistance, and where there's a hostile world, and it's darkness, and there you go, and you don't give in to the temptations of this world. That's Naaseh v'nishma, the Naaseh before the nishma. So what he explained in this paragraph is the real meaning of nishma, not just technically hearing something, but it means nishma belev, the niskabel, and here we're saying that even before the person internalizes and enjoying it and feels the pleasure of it, does it anyway, like a soldier, following orders. Following orders, whether you understand it or whether you feel it or not. That's what Naaseh v'nishma, Naaseh k'edim l'nishma means. Any questions? V'zeu she'ikdimu Naaseh l'nishma. And this is the chiddush of the fact that they preface Naaseh l'nishma, why it's such a great thing. The hainu, which means, she'af al pi she'ein le'yadayim b'china zu de nishma, even though that he still does not have the nishma, that it's resonating with him and he appreciates it and it's internalized, lias libe chofetz be'emes be'yichud zeh, he's not reached that level that his heart truly desires this yichud. Im kol zeh, nevertheless, hu oiseh samut lolav, he commits, he fulfills that which is the responsibility placed upon him, b'bchinas naser kfiyah, in a form of forcing himself to do it. Like I said, a soldier following orders. It makes no difference whether you understand, whether you feel it, whether you relate to it. You're told it's an order, you do it. V'hu inyan avedus eved pashut. Yeah, here he spells it out explicitly. This is the aved of eved pashut. There's an eved neman, there's an eved pashut. Samach Vav explains. Eved pashut means a simple servant. Doesn't ask questions. He's completely devoted and dedicated to what the master tells him to do. B'chinas Yaakov, before he spoke about Yisrael, is the Aved of Tzadikim. This is Eved Pasha b'chinas Yaakov. Yaakov Avdi, it says Yaakov, my servant, emphasis on the word servant. Shenizbar li'il be'erech, that was explained earlier. Remember, all this is the language in Samach Vav. This is not me summing it up. It's actual language of Samach Vav. I'm not quoting every line. I'm only quoting that which is necessary, but it's all from Samach Vav. V'zeu Kabolas el dafke. And this is the meaning of Kabolas el dafke. Kabolas el literally means to accept the yoke. Why is it a yoke? Because you're just doing it, even if you don't feel anything. You're just doing it. It's a yoke. You're accepting the God's authority completely. Kabolas el dafke. Lachriach es atzmei. Kisher la'el, to force himself like an ox for work. If you give the ox, you laden the ox with heavy objects, or the ox is plowing the field. So the expression is kisher la'el, like an ox with its kabolas, with its yoke. A yoke is actually a yoke that's placed on an ox when it plows a field. They put a yoke on it. Kasher le'el, al esek hatera mitzvos, complete commitment in esek of Torah mitzvos, even without any giluyim, without any feeling or any appreciation of it, just complete commitment. Zeu inyan Naaseh v'nishma. Well, let me stop for a moment. Let me stop. Again, any questions? Zehu inyan Naaseh v'nishma. And this is the inyan of Naaseh and nishma. The nishma b'derech klal u'b'chinas habitl shal pitam v'das. Nishma in general is the bitl that makes sense, al pitam v'das. You contemplate and you appreciate God. You appreciate what God does for you. You appreciate it in a way that you can relate to it. And therefore you have a bitl, al pitam v'das. Be'ezem adrega shehu. Whatever level it may be. Different levels of tam v'das, different people contemplate on different levels. The Naaseh hu inyan Kabolas el malchus shalamayla mitam v'das. And Naaseh, on the other hand, is accepting the yoke of the sovereignty of Hashem that's beyond tam v'das. It's not based on a logical conclusion. It's not based on a contemplation and a rational calculation. Umashegdimu Naaseh lenishma. And the fact that the Yidden, by Matan Torah, they prefaced Naaseh before Nishma, Igdimu Naaseh lenishma, Haynu shoyeh b'mabitl de Kabolas el machas shemayim b'b'chinas hanoches atzmusam legamri. That's stating that they had this bitl, this complete avekleg, in Yiddish you would say, this complete subjugating themselves. Hanoches atzmusam legamri, entirely. Liyas b'chinas avedas eved dafke. Dafke aveda of an eved. Even though they had plenty of intelligence and they had emotions and everything, but their commitment was one of avedas eved. That didn't matter. It was not based. They suspended their so-called faculties and just committed like an avedas eved dafke. Shezem maili yisera be'en areich legabe aveda shal pitam v'das. And it's an infinitely greater quality to do so than the Aveda al Pitam V'das, which is then driven by the logic, by the rationale, which then is also commensurate to how much you understand. This type of commitment is entire. It's like when you say skashus, a connection that is not based on it's not tluya b'davar, it's not dependent on something. It's not dependent on the reasoning, because reasoning can change. This is complete commitment. I'm all in, basically. Again, the Rebbe Rashab says, as explained at length earlier in Samach Vav. And it's dafke through Naaseh of this Kabbalah sale, Magim b'b'chinas atzmus ein sof canal. That's what you reach to atzmus ein sof. As we'll soon learn, Naaseh, Nishma, you reach to high levels of Giluyim. It's like Limud HaTorah. But Naaseh it reaches all the way to Atzmus Ein Sof. V'zehu sha'idei himshichu mebchinas hakeser, and that's why it says keser, that they're given the keser, because they're reaching keser b'chinas ha'ayin ha'atzmi. Keser is the ayin atzmi, the core ayin, that's higher than the keser. Shezeu b'shorshe b'chinas ha'helam, the Atzmus Ein Sof canal. In its root, that's the helam of Atzmus Ein Sof. A level of ayin that's higher than any form of shape and form of structure. Helam the Atzmus Ein Sof. Now you may wonder, is this helam ha'atzmi that we learned in Ayin Beis? It may be. It definitely sounds similar and of course consistent, because as we're going to learn how this all connects back to the Aveda of Neshamis, we'll soon get to that. Right now, he's comparing Naaseh and Nishma, and this is what Naaseh does. Hagdamis Naaseh l'Nishma reaches in Atzmus all the way to the root, Helema Atzmus. But this is far from over. There's much more in Samach Vav that he's going to explain. But let me stop again here for any questions.
Maybe I'm getting ahead. Can you hear me, Rabbi?
Yes.
There's a lot of emphasis here on Naaseh, less so on Nishma, for the reasons you gave over here, which is the Rebbe's giving over. But what we talked about the transformation of the Nefesh of Bahamas to submit itself to God's will, and that's transformation. Here he's saying his kafia, his subjugation of the Yetzer, is enough to essentially enable the neshama to reach Atzmus, whereas one would have thought that to bring Atzmus into this world, the whole idea of Ishapcha, the transformation
Yeah, but
of the
that's what
nefesh
you're that's
habams.
calling Atzmus bringing to the world is Atzmus coming begili. That's
Mhm,
already the Nishma. That's the second level. Naaseh is the first level of reaching Atzmus. Then
mhm.
there's a question of revealing Atzmus.
I see. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll discuss. This is going to be discussed soon, more at length. You'll see. Any other questions? Never forget that the main thing is down here below, because down tachtenim, the neshama comes down below to affect the animal soul. That's the biggest chiddush, is to transform the darkness of this world. Then you obviously elevate and become higher and higher levels. After Avedis HaNeshama with the Nefesh Abam is the Ner Mitzvah, Tere'er. Remember that. Ria, Giluyim.
So this is on page 41, correct?
Yeah, we're now in the last paragraph of page 41. So let's continue. We'll read another paragraph. We'll read more. Vihine. I'll follow along here. As always, things the plot thickens. Vihine. And now, Be'inyan Aveda de Kabolas El Malchus Shamayim Nizboyer Bezin Yonim. This Aveda that we just said, total dedication, total aveklek, hanochas atzmuse legamri. You're completely committed, which was, of course, the main chiddush. The chiddush was not that the Yidden understood what God wanted and therefore they appreciated. It was that they totally committed. It's like a marriage. It's absolute, unconditional commitment. So in this Aveda of Kabolas Machshmem, Nizboyer Bezin Yonim, was explained earlier, two things were explained. There are two things in this Kabbalah sale. Echad, Haveda the mitzvah, the mitzvahs maisis, vav vedas habirurim lamata. One, where does this manifest in our Aveda, in practical applied? How do we apply this? In mitzvahs maisis. When we do an actual mitzvah, not just learn about it and understand it, but we perform the mitzvah. V'aveda sabirurim lamata, and the aveda of clarifying and separating and refining and elevating the sparks down below. This is all b'bchinas aveda seved, in a level of aveda seved. We committed to it and we do it. Like some people will say, I appreciate God, but I don't have to do any actions. That's not an eved. An eved, a soldier, goes out to war. He doesn't just say, I appreciate the orders I was given, you actually perform them. So one thing in Kabbalah sale manifests in mitzvahs maisis and aveda sabirurim. Aveda sabirurim is simply the work of whether when you eat a meal, you're going to work, and you're redeeming the sparks that are hidden, embedded within the physical world. So all this is in the category of aveda seved, first Kabbalah sale part, with first inyan in Kabbalah sale. The second is the Kabolas sale in Torah. You're learning Torah, but not just learning Torah because you appreciate its intelligence. In other words, as an academic exercise where your mind is being stimulated. But you're learning it with Kabolas ben shanasa eved. So in earlier Samach Vavi elaborate, Torah on its own is like Tam V'das. You learn Torah, it's gishmak. It's enjoyable. It's not like a mitzvah maisis. You could have a geschmack in it, but a mitzvah is just doing the mitzvah. It's performing the mitzvah. In Torah, there's that element of gilui. It's like a ben. But a ben shanasa eved is a ben, even though I appreciate Torah, but it goes even further. I'm learning it because it's Hashem's Torah. That's why we say Nesana Torah, the bracha Nesana Torah. Before we learn, it's not just learning because it's a stimulating science and intelligence, but b'derech Kabolas sale. So when you learn Torah with Kabolas sale, and the Ayin Beis in Samach Vavi explained at length what that means. That's the second aspect of Kabolas sale. So there's Kabolas sale mitzvah mitzvahs, and Kabolas sale in Torah, mitzvahs and berurim. Now, I know when you start thinking about Ayin Beis, we didn't really talk about Torah in this level. Torah was seen more as Torah Gilui. But you may recall, there's also, you can reach in Torah itself, you can reach a level of Esem through Kabolas, which we'll talk about later. But in Samach Vav, that's a big theme. And it definitely will help us understand Ayin Beis as well. Because in Ayin Beis, but Pashtus, Mitzvos, and especially Tefillah, which we haven't gotten to yet, we'll soon talk about Tefillah, is the skafia, is the Kabolas sale. From the bottom up, we're working hard to connect. And Torah is the Amshach from above. But here you'll see he's introducing in Torah, there's also an element of Kabolas sale, which connects the Torah to the Etzem. We'll talk about that later soon, a bit later. Just in case anyone's thinking, just know this will be coming. But for now, let's just keep in mind the two aspects to Kabolas sale, one in Mitzvos and Bedurim, and one in Torah.
Could I ask a question, Rabbi, or should I hold on to it?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm struggling to understand why people think it's such a big deal that they said Naaseh and Ishma. They just witnessed like this amazing thing. So like when you are overcome with something, you just say, okay, I'm in. Like, I don't understand.
Really? I mean, we live in a world of 8 billion people. The amazing things happen to these 8 billion people all the time. Blessings, the blessing of life.
But they're not aware. They're not aware. It wasn't an event like it was an event that we left Egypt. I mean, that's why we have to remember it every day.
So
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, God bless you. You have that type of level. But I see a lot of people experiencing very big things, and they don't necessarily they're all in. They see it more like either they earned it or they deserved it, and you've never heard of a thing called an ego? You never hear people take for granted their blessings and miracles?
Let me say this, and I think it relates to this week's Torah portion also, because
did you hear what I responded? You never heard people who have great things happen to them in their lives and they take it for granted? It's the first time you hear that?
I'm sure I do too. I take things for granted. I mean, everybody does.
So for them to say Naaseh and Ishma, they're all in for the rest of their lives is like a soldier that drafts himself and there's no out. I see that as a major thing.
I'm not minimizing.
Do you know any intelligent people that sign lifetime contracts and give away their life to something?
I'm not minimizing it. All I'm saying is I think that it all relates to this idea of
with all respect, you're talking theoretically. When it comes down to bottom line, most people don't necessarily commit entirely.
I'm sorry, but I beg to differ. I'm not talking theoretically. I'm talking from experience, and it relates to this week's Torah portion, which has to do with the curses and has to do with finding the light in the darkness. When you've been, when you have been permeated by darkness, when you've been, in that situation, and then you've been released from it, then, like you may not have the constant awareness of it, but you know that something amazing happened to you, and you can't.
So listen, in my life experience, I find people initially, yes, they commit, but for it to last, for it to be a real permanent commitment, I find that to be not so common.
Okay.
So anyone that finds it, God bless you. Then I respect that.
No, all I'm saying is thank you, but all I'm saying is I think this is why this is a way to sort of make sense, if you will, of bad, God forbid, bad things happening to good people, and I think that it's just like this week's Torah portion is a wake up call.
Yeah, but I find that people will say, even if I have all the blessings, if one bad thing happens to me, they right away give up on God.
Well, that's called faith.
Sure. Are you? I mean, maybe you're that way. That you are completely.
No.
I meet people every day that are not that have great things happen to them. One second, let me finish. Great things happen to them, and they're not all in. I'm not sure where you're talking about. That's what I'm saying. It may apply to you or some individuals, but I don't see that as just a given. I see it as a major chiddush when someone says Naaseh l'nishma in a real way, that no matter what you ask of them, they will be there. There are many millionaires and billionaires. Can you tell me anyone that if someone comes to them the name of a cause of Hashem to build a shul or something, they're ready to give all their money away?
I don't think anybody's ready to give all of their money away.
Why not? If they're all in, why not?
Well, I mean, that's a higher level of faith for sure.
Well, that to me means all in, that you're really all in.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And trust me, for their own interests, they will give
Yes.
much more than they. So
Of
what
course.
does that tell you? Okay.
All right.
I'm not
but
trying
anyway.
to be. I'm not trying to be
No.
pessimistic. I'm just being
No,
realistic about the reality.
I understand. I'm
You
just
asked me
saying.
what's the chiddush of Nagdamas Naaseh and
It's,
Nishma. I see it's
I
quite a big
wasn't.
chiddush.
No, I didn't see. No, what I was saying was that when you experience that kind of powerful thing that we're supposed to remember every single day,
But we're
and
going in
really.
circles. You said that, and I responded.
All right, okay. I'm sorry. I'll
Nothing to
take
be
it.
sorry about. I responded. You asked a question. You asked me, since you see such wonderful things, Jews saw it, what's the big thing that they said, Nagdamas Naaseh and Nishma? And I'm explaining what I think is the big thing in it. Because even when you see amazing things, it's not just automatic that you become all committed.
And Robin, you were struggling with Imuna and tried to explain. This is the moment of Imuna for all the nation, that they trust and they blindly were in.
Yes. Well, but because they did it, maybe it's because we were all together. We weren't doing it on our own like we do today. We were all together. So we all saw it together. So
Okay.
we all anyway. All right. Sorry. I apologize.
Apologize for what? For asking a question? don't have to
No, because
apologize.
I get it's an emotional thing. I mean, anyway. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll stop here. We'll stop here. So we'll stop at the beginning of the paragraph, the last paragraph on page 41, where we're starting to discuss Kabolas el Malchus Shamayim, both in Mitzvos and Berurim, and in Torah, as we shall continue the discussion.